So it is really a very democratic process, slightly further removed from the man in the street, I guess, than at a national parliament, but it's still, it is, in my view, a very democratic process.
Dagana 23. til 27. maí verður kosið til Evrópuþingsins, Þings Evrópusambandsins. Þingmenn eru kosnir af borgurum Evrópusambandsins til 5 ára í senn. Evrópuþingið fer með löggjafarvald í Evrópusambandinu ásamt ESB ráðinu og vægi þess í ákvarðanatöku hefur aukist stig af stigi síðari ár. Samþykki þingsins þarf auk þess fyrir fjárlögum Evrópusambandsins og hefur Evrópuþing nýtt sér þau völd á því sviði til að hafa áhrif á málaflokka sem kalla á útgjöld. Þingið gegnir einnig mikilvægu eftirlitshlutverki gagnvart öðrum stofnunum sambandsins og sinnir samskipti við þjóðþing aðildarríkjanna. Þá hefur þingið látið til sín taka á vettvangi mannréttinda og lýðræðisumbóta. En hvað kosið í vor? Eru áhrifaþættirnir þeir sömu og í hefðbundnum landskosningum? Og af hverju skiptir þetta okkur Íslendinga máli? Til að ræða þessar spurningar höfum við fengið hingað Michael Mann, sendiherra Evrópusambandsins á Íslandi. So welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you.
First, maybe in the beginning, if you could explain a bit for Icelandic audience the electoral process for the European Parliament elections.
Sure. So basically there are 751 members of the European Parliament at the moment, and they are divided up roughly according to the size of population of the country. So Germany has the most MEPs, followed by France and Britain. But it's not quite as simple as that, because the smallest countries have proportionally more members of the European Parliament than they would have purely based on their population. So these, each country, each European Union country has an election. This year they're held between the 23rd and the 26th of May. And each country does the election according to their domestic traditions in a way. So there are it is done on a national basis, but they are standing for the European Parliament and they are standing on a European platform.
How significant is the European Parliament? How important are these elections?
They're very important. The European Parliament is extremely important in the European Union. When it was first established in 1979, it was just an advisory body where MEPs were appointed. But over time, with the changes of the European treaties, it's become more and more important. And now, basically, the European Parliament is half of the legislature of the European Union. So when a draft law is proposed, it is the European Parliament, together with the Council of Ministers, which is the ministers of the 28 governments, who make the decision. So it's a real law-making institution. It's extremely important. And what is decided in these elections means what will be decided in European legislation for the next 5 years. So it's extremely influential.
How democratic is the European Union?
It's very democratic. I mean, we hear all the time about a democratic deficit in the European Union, which I simply don't believe in. Decisions, as I said, are taken by members of the European Parliament who are voted directly by the citizens of the 28 member countries, jointly with the Council of Ministers, which is the relevant minister from the democratically elected governments of the country. So if it's a piece of environmental legislation, it will be co-decided by the European Parliament, and it will go through the Environmental Committee in the European Parliament before it's voted on, and it's decided on jointly with the environment ministers from the 28 countries. They both come up with amendments and changes, and if they can't agree on a final form, then they get together and negotiate. So it is really a very democratic process, slightly further removed from the man in the street, I guess, than at a national parliament, but it's still, it is, in my view, a very democratic process.
What about transparency? European Union has worked on quite many, or at least tried to work on more transparency of the institutions. For the general public, they don't see transparency.
That may be true, but I think there is a reasonable amount of transparency. The votes in the European Parliament are taken in public view. Everybody can see who has voted for what. The votes are taken in the chamber in Strasbourg. The committee meetings are open to public scrutiny. The plenary sessions are also open to public scrutiny and are televised. In the Council of Ministers, often decisions are taken behind closed doors, but there is a quite heavy journalistic scrutiny of the workings of the Council of Ministers, and the ministers from the countries have to go back and justify and explain the decisions that have been taken. So, you know, I think in the European Union context, people who are living in different countries perhaps don't maybe know how the transparency works, but I think there is I would argue there's a relatively high amount of transparency, and it is possible to sort of see what the justifications were for the decision-making process.
Going back to the political parties, could you elaborate a little bit on the multi-party system, and what are the issues in the selection between those parties, and the role
in
of
this
the
particular election?
Yeah.
The political groups, the EPP, the S&D, the ALDE, which is the Liberal group, they all have a program, a European program for the elections. The national parties that belong to these groups will also put together a European manifesto, and they will go out and campaign in their countries on European issues. Obviously, in the minds of voters, sometimes domestic issues also play a part, but there is an effort made to have a European manifesto for each of the political groups, which will largely reflect the sort of interest that they have. You will find that the Liberal group will differ very much from the sort of the extreme left group on economic issues. It will follow the sort of logical pattern that you would expect from a Christian Democrat differing from a Social Democrat. So you know, the programs do deal with European issues, and there are a number of issues that all of the political groups in this coming election would agree are big issues for the European Union. You can talk about migration, for example, what to do about migration. You can talk about climate change. We have proposals from the European Commission at the moment that 25% of our next budget for the European Union will in some way be connected to fighting climate change. This is a big issue. There is also, of course, post-Brexit, and with you know, looking to the future, there is how the European Union should develop institutionally in the future as well. So these are all issues that will be on the table, plus a myriad of other things, of course.
Can I ask you about the low turnout of these elections? So average, we are seeing, I think last it was 42 or 43%, which is considered to be low turnout.
Well, it's a problem. It has been a problem in the past. I think sometimes in some countries there was a bit of election weariness, perhaps. In some countries, I'm British, and I know that people in Britain for many years didn't really identify with the European elections, didn't realise how important they were. So it has been a problem with low turnout, because obviously the more turnout you get, the more legitimacy this organisation has, and the better it represents the wide range of opinion within the European Union. So a big effort is being made to raise the participation rate, and the European Parliament has actually launched a campaign called This Time I'm Voting, and there is a major effort being made to get people out to vote. Even within Iceland, I'm the EU's ambassador to Iceland, there is a large section of EU nationals living and working in Iceland. We have been trying to make it known to them how they can vote from abroad, by when they have to do it, where they do it. Obviously you have 10, 20,000 Polish people here. That's a serious block of people. So we've been trying to publicise how important it is to go out and vote, and that's happening across the European Union.
But doesn't this development show us that people think it's a significant institution?
I think a lot of people probably do misunderstand the importance of the European Parliament, but I think we've been trying very hard to make people understand that this is a body that makes laws and sets the direction of policy for the European Union, and how important it is. And we're hoping that with a little bit more education, a little bit more information, and a little bit more encouragement, people will turn out. I think it's encouraging in a way, perversely, that since the Brexit vote, the popularity of the European Union has gone up in every single one of our member states, according to our polls, and that perhaps might encourage people to come out and vote.
I want to ask you a little bit on the implication for Iceland. How is that affecting Iceland? And this relates to Maybe another question. Our bilateral relations, of course, the core is the EEA agreement. Yeah. And when that was created, European Parliament was with much less power. Is there a way to work on a better relationship with the Parliament because of this structure in the EEA?
Well, as you said in your question, the fact that this is the European Parliament is one of the two bodies that actually makes European Union law. Obviously, Iceland is a member of the single market through the EEA agreement. So laws that are made on the single market, which cover a whole range of topics, from the environment to cross-border sales to all employment legislation, all sorts of things, they are decided by the European Parliament. So this law, all these single market laws will have to be adopted by Iceland as well. So who sits in the European Parliament has a direct effect upon the future direction of single market legislation in Iceland, so it's very important. We do try and maintain a good contact between the Parliament, the Þingið here, and the European Parliament. There is a joint parliamentary committee that meets regularly. A few of our MEPs from this committee were out in Reykjavik not very long ago. They meet with their Icelandic counterparts, discuss issues of the day. So there is a constant sort of exchange of information, and I just think it's important that people maintain this, and perhaps they can build on it in the future, because what is happening in Brussels and Strasbourg does have a direct influence here.
Ambassador, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much for inviting me. Enjoyed it. Thank you.